Sometimes, it's not the problem that breaks you, it's the way you see it. You feel stuck, anxious, and overwhelmed. Something goes wrong at work, someone close disappoints you, or you just wake up with that heavy feeling you can't explain. Most of us react the same way. Fix it fast, numb it, run from it. But what if the real breakthrough happens when you stop trying to escape the discomfort and instead ask one simple question? What is this trying to teach me? You see, not every pain is here to punish you. Some are here to guide you. That recurring conflict, that deep restlessness, that quiet sense of this isn't it, they're not signs of weakness, they're messages. Quiet ones, from the inside. And the moment you shift how you see them, everything else begins to shift too. This message isn't here to motivate you with fluff or tell you to just be positive. It's here to help you look inward, honestly, courageously, and discover what's really behind the struggle. And once you do, life doesn't just feel lighter, it becomes more real. If you've ever felt like life was speaking to you through the hardest moments, this video is for you. Drop a comment below and share what part of your life feels the heaviest right now. And if this resonates, make sure to subscribe, because the journey inward is just beginning. 1. Every problem carries a message from within. There was a time in my life when everything seemed to be in place. I had a stable job, a routine, people who cared about me, and no obvious crisis to blame. Yet every morning I woke up with this quiet discomfort, like a thin layer of sadness covering everything I did. Not loud enough to cause alarm, but present enough that I couldn't ignore it. I told myself it was stress, maybe burnout. So I tried the usual fixes. Long weekends, eating better, mindless scrolling, pushing through with false positivity. But nothing worked. The feeling didn't fade. In fact, the more I tried to drown it out, the more it grew. Not as panic, not even as pain, but as emptiness. That kind of hollowness you can't explain. That's when it hit me. Maybe I shouldn't be trying to get rid of it. Maybe I needed to listen. See, we're taught that problems should be solved quickly. That discomfort is a sign that something's wrong, and our job is to escape it. But what if discomfort is sometimes the truth trying to speak? What if the pain you feel isn't there to punish you, but to push you toward what's real? When I finally slowed down enough to ask myself the hard question, what is this trying to tell me? The answer wasn't dramatic. It was simple, but it cut deep. I realized I'd been living by default, not by design. I wasn't unhappy because something was missing. I was misaligned because I was disconnected from my own sense of meaning. And that's what many of us do. We check all the boxes: education, career, relationships, but we ignore the quiet pull of authenticity. We call it anxiety. We call it restlessness. But beneath those labels, there's often a message. You've outgrown something. Your mind may dismiss it, but your body knows. It tightens in places it used to feel open. Your energy drops around certain people or situations, even though everything looks fine. That's not weakness. That's your inner compass trying to reorient you. In those moments, it's tempting to reach for the surface-level answers. Force a mindset shift. Push harder. Stay productive. But healing doesn't always look like effort. Sometimes it looks like stopping. Pausing long enough to listen to the emotion under the noise. Because beneath every recurring frustration is a truth that's been buried. And until you hear it, life will keep handing you the same lesson in different disguises. Think about that one pattern that keeps showing up. Maybe it's a conflict in relationships or a deep dissatisfaction with work. You've changed the people, the places, the schedules, and yet the feeling follows. That's no coincidence. That's insight waiting for integration. These moments are not detours. They're checkpoints. They exist to wake you up, not weigh you down. But to decode them, you have to stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking what's trying to change through me. That shift from blame to curiosity is where growth begins. And here's the powerful part. The moment you listen, even a little, things start to shift. Not always outside, but within. That dull ache becomes direction. That restlessness becomes clarity. The mental clutter clears just enough for you to take one honest step, and then another. It doesn't matter if the path isn't clear yet. The moment you honor what your emotions are trying to say, you realign your energy with your truth. And from that place, real transformation begins. There's a kind of inner wisdom that doesn't shout. It whispers. It speaks through tension, through tiredness, through the urge to walk away from things that no longer fit. Most people override it because they're afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of letting go, afraid of what they might discover if they stop pretending everything's okay. But here's what I've learned. The fear of facing your truth is nothing compared to the cost of ignoring it. The longer you suppress the message, the louder the problems become. Until one day, life stops whispering and starts breaking things apart. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. That's your soul demanding you come back home. So if something feels off in your life, even if you can't name it, don't dismiss it. Don't rush to silence it. Sit with it. Ask it what it wants you to know. Not every problem needs a solution. Some just need space. Because when you listen long enough, your problem stops being a wall and becomes a window, one that opens inward, revealing the part of you that's ready to grow. 2. Your shadow is not the enemy you think it is. There are parts of you you've been taught to silence. The rage that flares when you're disrespected, the tears that come too quickly, the craving to be seen when you've convinced yourself it's better to disappear. Somewhere along the way, someone told you those parts were wrong, so you pushed them down. You kept smiling when you were tired. You stayed quiet when you wanted to scream. You became who you were expected to be. Strong, composed, and reliable. But here's the truth. What you reject in yourself doesn't go away. It waits, and eventually it demands your attention in ways you can't ignore. A friend of mine once admitted she hated being called too emotional. It started in childhood. Every time she cried, someone rolled their eyes or told her to stop being dramatic. So she built armor. She became resilient, sharp, and independent. But with that came exhaustion. She carried too much for too long, never asking for help, never letting anyone see her fall apart. One day, after breaking down from burnout, she said something I'll never forget. I think the part of me I've avoided the most is the part that just needed to be held. It wasn't weakness that broke her. It was her refusal to honor her own softness. That moment changed how she saw herself, and it made me look at my own shadow too. We all have one. Not a monster hiding in the dark, but a mirror reflecting the things we've disowned. It might be the part of you that gets jealous, the part that wants recognition, the part that feels insecure. We're so quick to label these things as flaws. But what if they're just human truths calling for understanding instead of shame? When you suppress your shadow, it doesn't shrink, it grows stronger. It slips into your habits, your relationships, your inner dialogue. You find yourself triggered by small things, overreacting without knowing why. Or maybe you keep sabotaging your own progress, always a step away from the life you want. That's not a coincidence. That's a shadow trying to get your attention, not to hurt you, but to ask for your care. The problem isn't the emotion itself. It's the judgment you attach to it. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness doesn't come from polishing your personality until it shines. It comes from sitting down with the parts you've locked away and asking, what do you need from me now? Because sometimes the piece of you that lashes out is the same one that wasn't allowed to speak up. The part that shuts down is the part that once felt powerless. These aren't signs of failure. They're traces of where you once needed safety and didn't receive it. The work is not to become someone else. The work is to come home to yourself, to see your triggers not as flaws to hide, but as signals to explore. When you allow the full spectrum of who you are to exist without shame, the proud parts, the scared parts, the messy parts, you begin to create emotional stability that no external praise or validation can match. It's not easy. Looking at your shadow means sitting with what you've long avoided. It means being honest about the fact that sometimes you're not okay, and that's okay. It means forgiving yourself for what you've suppressed and for how long you've carried it. But what you gain in return is worth everything. Clarity, calm, emotional grounding, and the ability to respond to life instead of reacting to it. When my friend started embracing her emotional depth, something shifted. She didn't cry anymore. She felt more. She didn't collapse. She softened. And in that softness, she found a strength that rigid control had never given her. Her relationships deepened. her anxiety quieted. She began to rest, not just physically but mentally. Because once you stop fighting your shadow, you free yourself from the war within. The truth is, we all carry emotional wounds that shape how we respond to the world. But these wounds don't have to define us. They can become doorways to self-awareness and peace if we're willing to stop running. You don't need to fix your shadow. You need to see it. And when you do, when you finally accept the full picture of who you are, something remarkable happens. The anger begins to calm. The anxiety begins to fade. Not because it's been pushed away, but because it's finally been heard. That is emotional resilience. That is the foundation of real healing. And that is the beginning of becoming whole. Not perfect, just real. 3. The people who trigger you reflect your hidden self. There's a moment that happens to all of us. Someone says something small, something careless, maybe even something meant as a joke, and it hits you like a punch in the gut. You smile, nod, and stay composed. But hours later, it's still echoing in your mind. You keep replaying it, wondering why it affected you so deeply. From the outside, it didn't seem like much, but something inside was stirred. That's not random, that's a reflection. And the more you ignore it, the more it repeats. Maybe someone at work casually took credit for something you did. You laughed it off. No big deal, right? But later, you find yourself overthinking it, feeling tight in your chest, even questioning your worth. Why did that bother you so much? Maybe it's not about the person. Maybe it's about the story behind the reaction, a story you haven't told yourself in years. Maybe it's the quiet truth that for most of your life, you've been overlooked. Maybe as a child, you did everything right but never felt truly seen. Maybe now, in that moment of being passed over again, that same wound reopened, and instead of facing it, you direct the fire outward. But the fire was never about them. It was about you. This is how our inner world speaks, not always through thoughts, but through emotional spikes. When someone triggers you, they often awaken something unresolved, something buried, something waiting. And in that flash of anger, jealousy, shame, or insecurity, you're being offered a glimpse into the part of yourself you've refused to meet. This doesn't mean the other person is innocent or right. It just means the intensity of your reaction belongs to something deeper than the surface event. It's your emotional history rising to meet the present moment. We often think emotional triggers are flaws, but in reality, they are maps. They reveal what needs healing, what needs understanding. If you're willing to follow that map inward, you'll discover not weakness, but clarity. You'll start noticing patterns, how the same types of people or situations keep showing up. Not by accident, but because there's something inside you that still hasn't been seen, acknowledged, or accepted. Until you learn the lesson, the classroom repeats. Until you face the mirror, life will keep handing it to you. What's difficult is that this truth asks for self-responsibility. It's easier to blame, to distance, to label others as toxic. But growth doesn't come from casting shadows on everyone else. It comes from recognizing your own. And the truth is, no one can make you feel something unless it already lives inside you. The irritation, the resentment, the fear, they may be sparked by someone else, but their roots are in your story. So the next time someone triggers you, pause. Instead of immediately reacting, ask, what is this touching in me? Is it an old fear of not being enough? A longing to be respected? A buried shame you've carried for years? When you trace it back, you'll find that the person in front of you is simply a messenger, a mirror. And you can choose to use that moment as a gateway, not to suppress, not to explode, but to understand. This doesn't mean tolerating harm or crossing your own boundaries. Emotional awareness and emotional protection can coexist. But when you understand why something hurts, you gain power. You're no longer reacting from the wound, you're responding from the awareness. And that shift, subtle as it may seem, changes everything. You begin to take control of your energy. You stop being emotionally drained by every conflict. You stop needing to prove, defend, or attack. Instead, you learn to hold space for yourself, to protect your peace without losing your center. One of the most freeing things you can realize is that your emotional reactions are not your enemy. They're signals. You're not broken because something triggered you. You're being invited to meet yourself more honestly. And when you do that consistently, something powerful happens. You stop fearing your emotions. You start listening to them. You build emotional grounding that no one else can give or take away. Over time, you'll notice the triggers soften, the patterns shift. The people who once disturbed your peace begin to lose their power over you, not because they changed, but because you did. Because you stopped outsourcing your worth. Because you began the quiet work of reclaiming yourself, one reaction at a time. In the end, the people who trigger you are not interruptions. They are opportunities. And if you're brave enough to look at what they reflect, you'll find something more valuable than control or comfort. You'll find yourself. 4. Intuition is the quiet guide you've been ignoring. There is a voice inside you that doesn't argue, doesn't shout, and doesn't beg to be heard. It doesn't have charts, proof, or logic you can show to anyone else. But it knows. It's the feeling in your chest before your mind catches up. It's the pause between I should and this doesn't feel right. And yet, more often than not, we override it. We bury it under logic, under people's expectations, under the fear of being wrong. We call it uncertainty, when really, it's a kind of knowing we've been trained to ignore. My older cousin once dated someone who, on paper, looked perfect. Stable job, kind, polite, well-liked. He checks all the boxes, she used to say. But every time they were together, her body tensed slightly. There was something she couldn't name, a discomfort that showed up as silence in the car, awkward laughs that didn't feel real, moments where she felt like she was shrinking. Still, she stayed for a whole year, and when it ended, not in dramatic betrayal, but in emotional burnout, she looked at me and said, I knew. I just didn't trust myself enough to act on it. She didn't lack information, she lacked permission. Permission to listen to her inner guide instead of the checklist in her mind. And this is what many of us do. We silence that quiet internal voice because it's not backed by evidence, because we don't want to disappoint others, because we're scared of what we might lose. But in doing so, we often lose something far more precious, our connection to ourselves. Intuition doesn't always speak in words. Sometimes it's a tightening in your stomach, a sudden drop in energy, a lingering discomfort that doesn't go away even after you try to explain it. We're told to be rational, to make smart choices, to think through things. But some of the deepest clarity you will ever feel doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from becoming still enough to notice what you already know. It might show up as an urge to walk away from a conversation that feels off, even if no one said anything wrong. Or a strange sense of familiarity with someone you just met, like you've known them forever, even though logic says otherwise. These aren't random. They're signs. They're how your subconscious communicates with your conscious mind. And the more you ignore them, the more confused you become. Not because the world got louder, but because you stopped listening to yourself. Sometimes this inner knowing doesn't just appear in moments of decision, but in dreams. You might dream of a childhood home you haven't seen in years. You walk through each room, and somehow each one stirs something. A mix of comfort, sadness, even fear. You wake up with a lump in your throat and no explanation for why, but the dream lingers. It follows you into your morning coffee, your commute, your quiet moments. And you wonder, why that place? Why now? That dream wasn't meaningless. It was memory, emotion, unfinished business, all wrapped in symbols. It was a part of you rising from beneath the surface to remind you of what still lives within. Your intuition doesn't just speak through gut feelings. It speaks through images, sensations, fragments of your own emotional history. And when you slow down enough to reflect, you begin to see what it was pointing toward all along. What makes this difficult is that intuition rarely comes with guarantees. It doesn't tell you what's going to happen. It only tells you what feels right. And for those of us raised to trust results over resonance, that can feel like a gamble. But here's the paradox. When you stop needing certainty and start trusting your inner compass, life begins to open in ways logic could never predict. That relationship that didn't make sense to leave, suddenly you breathe easier without it. That job you weren't sure you could walk away from, now you feel alive in a way you didn't think was possible. It wasn't a strategy, it was alignment. It was the moment you chose to trust the quiet voice instead of the loud world. The truth is that the voice never really leaves. It waits. It waits through every overthought decision, every ignored signal, every time you choose fear over truth. And it will wait as long as it takes for you to come back. Not to the person the world told you to be, but to the one you've always been. The one who knows, even when there's no proof. So the next time something inside you whispers, even if it doesn't make sense, listen. You don't need louder advice. You don't need more analysis. You need stillness. And in that stillness, you will remember you've known all along. 5. Dreams reveal what your waking mind hides. There are nights when your dreams feel more real than the day you just lived. You see faces you haven't thought about in years, walk through places that don't exist anymore, feel emotions that catch you off guard the moment you wake. You brush it off, telling yourself it was just a dream. Odd, vivid, meaningless. But part of it lingers. The feeling doesn't leave. You carry it through breakfast, into the car, into the silence between conversations. And maybe it's not what happened in the dream that matters. Maybe it's what your mind was trying to tell you without words. Have you ever dreamed of walking through your old childhood home? The one with the squeaky floorboard near the kitchen? Or the hallway light that never fully lit the way? You haven't seen it in decades. And yet, in that dream, it's all there. The rooms, the colors, even the smell of something warm and distant. You move from room to room, and with each step a feeling rises. Sometimes peace, sometimes fear, sometimes something you can't quite name. Then you wake up, and you're not sure why it hit you so hard. But it did. That kind of dream isn't random. It's not just nostalgia or mental noise. It's your inner world surfacing. Not to confuse you, but to reconnect you with what still lives inside. Because sometimes what your conscious mind forgets, your subconscious keeps alive. The child who never spoke up, the teenager who never felt safe, the part of you that still wonders if you're enough. These aren't just memories. They're layers of self, left behind unfinished but still breathing. Dreams have a way of bypassing the walls we build during the day. When you're asleep, there's no schedule to keep, no identity to protect, no mask to maintain. The truth doesn't need permission. It just shows up, dressed as symbols, people, places. And the more you ignore it, the louder it knocks the next night. Not to haunt you, but to remind you. You don't need to analyze every detail, but you do need to feel what it stirred. Because emotions and dreams don't lie. They point to something still unresolved. A question you haven't asked, a memory you've been afraid to visit, a truth you've labeled as weakness, even though it holds the key to your strength. This is why dismissing dreams as just the brain doing its thing robs you of an extraordinary tool. Dreams are not puzzles to be solved. They are mirrors. And if you look close enough, you start to recognize what your waking self avoids. The fear of being abandoned, the hunger to be seen, the guilt that still lingers long after you tried to move on. These things don't disappear just because you're awake. They shape your choices, your triggers, and your patterns. Dreams just make them visible again. And no, not every dream is clear. Sometimes it's messy, even surreal, but even then there's a thread, a feeling, a pattern. Something repeats, an image, a symbol, a person. You see the same hallway, you lose your voice again, you miss the train one more time. This is not a coincidence. This is inner intelligence trying to guide you, not to the past but through it, toward emotional clarity, toward grounding, toward your truth. The question is, will you listen? Or will you continue waking up and brushing it off, telling yourself it was nothing, when your entire nervous system is saying otherwise? When your emotional body is trying to process what your logical brain won't let in? Learning to work with your dreams doesn't mean becoming an expert in dream interpretation. It means becoming curious. It means asking, why that person? Why that place? Why that emotion? It means letting the dream sit with you, not just for meaning, but for feeling. Because sometimes the act of simply sitting with what rose in the night is enough to begin the healing. You don't have to go back and live in your past, but you do have to visit it to understand what's still shaping your present. And dreams are often the bridge. They reconnect you with parts of yourself you thought you outgrew, but never truly integrated. They whisper truths that daylight drowns out. And when you start honoring them, not decoding every detail, but respecting the message. You begin to realign your life from the inside out. Because what rises while you sleep isn't random. It's a revelation. It's the emotional clarity you've been too busy to notice. And maybe, just maybe, the dream wasn't a distraction. Maybe it was your soul finally getting a chance to speak. 6. Becoming whole matters more than being happy. There was a time when everything in my life looked exactly how I thought it was supposed to. I had structure, stability, good people around me, and goals that seemed worth chasing. From the outside, it seemed like I had figured things out. But inside, I was restless. I couldn't explain the unease that lived just beneath the surface of my routines. I kept thinking maybe I needed a break, a weekend away, a new project, a different schedule, a fresh book to reset my mindset, but nothing stuck. The stillness I was seeking always faded the moment I returned to myself. What I didn't understand back then was that I wasn't lacking success or productivity or clarity. I was lacking honesty, not with others, with myself. We're constantly told to chase happiness, to focus on feeling good, staying positive, and keeping the energy high. But happiness, as most of us discover, doesn't last in the way we're promised. It fades, it shifts, it depends too much on things that live outside of us: outcomes, recognition, and temporary highs. And the more we cling to it, the more anxious we become. Because deep down, we know it can't be held. What we're truly starving for isn't endless joy, it's wholeness. Not the filtered, curated, always okay version of ourselves we try to maintain, but the full picture. The light and the shadow. The parts we celebrate and the parts we try to silence. Wholeness is not about becoming more. It's about becoming real. I used to believe I needed to fix the parts of me that didn't look good from the outside. The anxiety, the overthinking, the low days where everything felt heavy. I kept trying to optimize myself, mentally, emotionally, and physically. I read all the right books, I practiced all the right habits, but still I'd wake up with that same sense of disconnection. Because I wasn't dealing with the root. I was patching the symptoms. I was decorating the walls while the foundation underneath was cracked. The truth was, I didn't need another tool. I needed to stop pretending. I needed to sit with the parts of myself I was ashamed of and finally admit this, too, is part of me. Wholeness means you stop running from your pain. You stop measuring your worth by how together you appear. You stop editing your truth to make it easier for others to digest. It means being able to say, I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm still healing. It means not waiting to feel perfect before you let yourself rest, or love, or begin again. And when you live from that place, where you're no longer trying to prove or impress or outrun, something incredible happens. The anxiety begins to loosen its grip. The restlessness softens because you're no longer trying to split yourself in half. You're no longer living in performance. You're grounded, not in the highs of happiness, but in the calm of self-acceptance. This is where emotional strength is born, not in the absence of pain, but in your willingness to face it. When you stop seeing your struggles as signs of failure and start seeing them as proof that you are fully alive, you become steady in a way no external circumstance can shake. You begin to practice emotional grounding in your everyday life, not by avoiding the hard moments, but by standing inside them with presence. You stop chasing clarity and begin living in alignment. You stop looking for peace in the next achievement and start finding it in your ability to hold your own truth without apology. And the irony is, once you embrace the parts of yourself you thought disqualified you from joy, you start feeling more joyful. Not because life gets easier, but because you've stopped fighting yourself. You realize that you don't have to be on all the time. You don't have to meet some invisible standard to be worthy of rest or love or meaning. You can be whole and healing, flawed and still worthy, unfinished and still enough. This kind of wholeness isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself, but it's felt in how you breathe, how you walk into a room, how you no longer shrink or puff up to earn space. It shows in how you stop judging yourself for how long it's taken and instead start honoring the fact that you never gave up. It shows in the way you let yourself live, fully, honestly, without the constant pressure to be better. So no, happiness isn't the goal, not the kind that's built on escape or illusion. The goal is wholeness. And that begins the moment you stop trying to become someone else and start coming home to the person you already are. No matter how overwhelming your problems may seem, the most powerful shift happens not outside of you, but within. When you stop seeing challenges as threats and begin to treat them as reflections, something changes. You stop chasing happiness, stop blaming others, and start taking ownership of your emotional healing. Every trigger, every restless night, every lingering dream, they all carry insight. And when you listen closely, you begin to uncover a deeper kind of peace, one rooted not in avoidance, but in awareness. The truth is, inner clarity doesn't come from overthinking. It comes from trusting your intuition, exploring your shadow, and allowing your subconscious to speak, even through dreams. When you develop emotional self-awareness and practice daily grounding, you create a ripple effect that transforms how others respond to you and how you respond to life. That's where your strength lies. That's where real change begins. Now it's your turn. Share in the comments below. Which part of this message spoke to you the most? Have you ever had a moment where a problem led to personal growth? Let's turn this space into a circle of reflection and support. And if this message helped you, like the video and subscribe to join others on this journey inward.